Is it really the right time for you to go to law school, or should you wait? I did a year of law school, dropped out, and a few years later, here I am going through the process all over again. And while I was very upset at the time, I've realized it was a blessing in disguise. I'm gonna share my experience with you. This is my opinion, and hopefully you can use this to help make your decision on when the right time to apply to law school is. The right time to go to law school, first and foremost, is when you have a good LSAT score. I did not know this the first time around, and that might seem obvious, but I just felt like I'm just gonna take the test. I don't want to take this test more than once. Whatever score I get is the score I'm gonna take. I'm gonna go to a law school, become a lawyer, and everything will be great after that. I was living in a shelter, was just trying to make the best life possible as soon as possible. But what I didn't know is that having a good LSAT score not only determines what school you can get into, it also determines scholarship money. So you can go to that top 14 school and you can possibly go for free, but you have to have a good LSAT score. The way that you can tell if you have a good enough LSAT score is think about all the schools that you want to go to, and then you're going to look up what their median LSAT score is. Ideally, you want to be above the median LSAT score to have the best chance of getting in. And if you can be above the 75th percentile, then you have a really good chance of getting a really great scholarship. Now, there is a website that can help you determine the chances you have of getting a scholarship to a school and how much of a scholarship. The website is lsatdemon.com/scholarships. I will link it in the description box down below. Take it with a grain of salt, but it is very helpful to at least give you an idea of what range you should be shooting for to determine if you have a good enough LSAT score. A lot of people will say, I'm going to apply this upcoming cycle regardless of what my LSAT score is, so I'm just going to try to get the best LSAT score so that I can just go this upcoming cycle. I need to go this upcoming fall. That was the approach that I took. And now I'm $30,000 in debt from a low tier school, from a year of law school, and I have to start over. So don't be like me. Don't pay for law school unless it's a top law school, and wait until you have the right LSAT score. If you don't, wait another year. Another year is not going to be any different than going this year. Trust me. Personally, I'm taking the LSAT in a few weeks in August, and I'm planning on taking it again in September. And I would love to apply for this upcoming cycle, but I also know what school I want to go to. And if I don't have the LSAT score that I need to have a fighting chance, I'm just gonna wait. So, first things first, make sure you have the LSAT score that you want. If you have any questions about this, feel free to ask them in the comments, and I will address them either in the comments or make another video if it's something that could use a whole video. Now, a lot of people will say, I can't study for the LSAT. I don't have time to study for the LSAT, so I can't get the LSAT score that I need, but I want to go to law school right away. And that brings me to the next point. You don't want to go to law school until you have the time. And that sounds obvious, but let me explain what I mean by that. If you don't have the time to study for the LSAT, you're not going to have time for law school. LSAT is way easier than law school is. Trust me, as tricky and difficult and frustrating as the LSAT can be, property law is a lot harder. So you got to get used to doing hard things, and how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you don't have the discipline to study for the LSAT, you may not have the discipline to do well in law school. And trust me, just take it from me. As somebody who has done a year and always did well, undergrad classes always came easy to me. You can't do good in law school if you don't study. Like, if you don't have the time to study, you can't "I'm just smart and things come easy to me" your way through law school. You simply can't know things if you don't read the cases, and you're going to be reading a lot of cases that are a lot of pages. And the first year law student reads at the speed of an average of 10 pages per hour. So now take your 4.0 student who's always done good in reading in school, and that student, it's gonna take that student an hour to read 10 pages at first until you get more used to it and better. So if you don't have the time to study or the discipline to study for the LSAT, it's not the right time for you. You also want to wait until you have the money to go. And again, that sounds obvious. Let me explain what I mean. They tell you you shouldn't work your first year for a reason. Now, unless you're going to a part-time program, and in that case, just disregard this and you can work. But let me tell you, it's not that much of a difference in classes, in how many classes you take. It's not a big difference between part-time and full-time. Like, we're talking, you're still going to be taking 3 classes and it's still going to be overwhelming if you're going part-time. So that being said, you want to be able to work as little as you can. Yeah, if you're going full-time, you want to not have to work. And I'm going to tell you why. And this is something I didn't know when I went to law school the first time, which is why it's a blessing in disguise that I dropped out and I'm starting over. Your first year grades are the determining factor in majority of the job opportunities that you'll have, or clerkships, because when it comes time to start applying for your summer internships and whatnot, you start applying for those at the beginning of your second year, I believe. And at that point, all they have to go off of are your first year grades. Now, if you play your cards right, you can have a guaranteed job offer before you even start your third year of law school. But all of that is dependent on your first year grades. So unlike undergrad, where opportunities are coming from your entire time at school, law school, your first year grades matter the most. Your first year is going to be the hardest, and you don't want to work your first year. So you want to wait until you can afford to not work, whether that means savings or whether that means loans. But again, learn from my mistakes. I wasn't able to get approved for Grad Plus loans. So that means I only got $10,000 per semester in loans, and I had to pay the rest of my tuition out of pocket. That means there was no loan money to take for my living expenses. You can kind of see why I probably couldn't finish that first year. I was in over my head, and I can do a whole nother video on my experience and why I had to drop out. If you want, let me know. But don't just assume that you're going to be able to get all the loans that you need, especially if you are older than the traditional student like myself and you actually have credit history that's not entirely favorable. There are certain things that it's just a hard no, like they're just not going to approve it. So when you can afford to take the loans out, or when you're able to get enough loans to cover your living expenses, or when you have enough living expenses saved, you can get a full ride. But if you can't survive without working that first year, it's not the time to go. You also don't want to go to law school if you don't have the mental capacity for law school at that time. What do I mean? Well, for me, my first year of law school, I was housing insecure. I was constantly dealing with evictions. I could not pay my rent consistently. And it's really hard to study, or it's really hard to focus on studying when you're worried about where you're gonna live. And I had a 3-year-old at the time, so it just wasn't the right time for me. And That's not going to concern everybody, but if you know that you have things going on in your life, if a family member is sick, if you just went through a really bad breakup, I mean, some people can power through that, but you know, I'm just giving you examples. You know yourself. If there are other things going on in your life that are taking a strong emotional and mental toll on you, I don't recommend starting law school. That was one of the biggest mistakes that I made, and a big reason of why I had to withdraw. You want to make sure that you're in a good place, and you don't have to be in a perfect place mentally. You know, a little depression, little anxiety, little neurospiciness, that's okay. But what I mean is, if you have major things going on in your life that are going to make it hard, like, there's nothing worse than having the pressure of doing well in law school when you're first figuring out what the hell is going on. Having that pressure plus the pressure of whatever else is going on in your life. For me, it was, where am I gonna live? Yeah, that's not ideal. So you want to wait until you're in a place that you can actually give it your attention and focus, which is, if we go back to, if you can't study for the LSAT, it may not be the best time to go to law school. That's a perfect example. If you have too much stuff going on in your life that you can't study for the LSAT, law school is going to be a lot more studying. So just think about that so that you can get the most out of it. I believe there was a comment, somebody had asked about when's the right time to go to law school because they're currently in undergrad, and I think they were wondering if they wanted to take, if they should take a gap year. Okay, so back to, you don't want to go until you have a good LSAT. Well, again, when I say don't be like me, your GPA matters. Now, I can't do anything about my GPA. It was 10 years ago. So I'm fighting for my life to get the best LSAT score that I can to have a fighting chance to get into a T14. That said, if you're still in undergrad and you don't have the best GPA, or you need to focus to maintain that GPA so you can't study for the LSAT, don't study for the LSAT. Your GPA, you only have one chance to get that right. So if you're still an undergrad and you can't afford to study for the LSAT and still get the best grades possible, wait, it's okay. Most schools actually prefer students who have taken a gap year. Gap year, 2 gap years, doesn't matter. You actually have probably a better chance of getting in not straight from undergrad. Doesn't mean you can't get in straight from undergrad. I just want you to know there's no pressure to go straight from undergrad. If anything, it'll help your chances of getting in. But it's not the right time to study for the LSAT and therefore go to law school if you can't afford to study because you're trying to maintain your GPA. I hope this video was helpful. I truly, sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, do not want people to make the same mistakes that I did. I am so grateful that I ended up withdrawing, because I would be in debt to a low tier school with low job prospects had I continued when I first started. A big reason of why I started this channel is because I wanted to educate people who look like me about the law school process, because a lot of us just don't know. I didn't really know my first time around, and also so that I can just help somebody. If I can just help one person not make the same mistakes that I did, then this is worth it. So thank you so much for watching. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe. I have a whole list of other videos coming up. I recently went to DC to visit Georgetown and GW, and I spoke to admissions, and I have a vlog coming of my trip and also what I learned from admissions while I was there about that school and about admissions in general. If there is something that you would like to see a video on, go ahead and comment and I will add it to my list. And otherwise, I will see you next time.